Time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says, on all who spend in good cause. Good deeds are opportunities, sparkling bright and true, raising you in the sight of Allah and adorning Al-Jannah for you. So rush to earn his reward. Don't forget the oppressed. And when you go to sleep at night.
Bismillah, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulil kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabi'a sunnatuhu ila yawmiddin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome again to another episode of A Time to Please Allah, here on Huda TV, coming live from Dubai as it does every week. And I'm your host, of course, Ismail Bullock, back again. And inshallah, with something changing on the show now, where we will alternate, me and Brother Gabriel. So it'll be 1 week myself with a guest co-host, and the following week will be Brother Gabriel with him also a guest and co-host. And with us again this week is Brother Nabil Aziz, who was obviously here last week and was discussing a very interesting and hot and you could say to some extent people make it a very political topic, and it's a topic that causes a lot of discussion, a lot of debates, a lot of yes and no's and for's and against, not only with non-Muslims, even with Muslims, and that is the topic which is polygyny, or what we know more has been more widely used as polygamy. So maybe you can give a recap for myself as well, and for the viewers who maybe didn't see last week's show. Give us a recap of what was discussed on the last week's show before we continue on to this.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khair for having me back again. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, thumma amma ba'd. So for those of you who didn't catch last week's show, it's up on YouTube, you can watch it. I recommend watching it because it was awesome. But to summarize real quick, we discussed two main things last week, and the first one was how we frame this discussion about polygyny and speak about it in a way that is respectful to the Sharia of Allah and respectful to each other's feelings as human beings. And the second thing we discussed was clearing a lot of misconceptions that men and both men and women have about the theory, the fiqh behind polygyny, and that was quite interesting as well. What we started on last week, and we didn't have time to go through it all, was some of the arguments that non-Muslims use against polygyny, especially in the West. We're living in the UAE and in the Muslim lands in general. This is something that is known, it's accepted, it's practiced, not as frequently or regularly probably as it used to, due to the influence of other cultures. But I mean, this is something that is known, and it's something that is sort of morally and socially acceptable, I suppose, to a certain degree. So in any case, so we'll try to tackle some of the arguments that a non-Muslim would use to Muslims who live in the West practicing polygyny. The first of them is that in the West, it depends on where you are, but overall in general, we have this thing called alternative lifestyle. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's like a politically correct term for basically moral degeneracy. So you'd have homosexuality. This is a big thing now. This is now basically you're like weird if you're a normal heterosexual person. Homosexuality is big. In Europe recently there was an article in the paper of one of these Scandinavian countries that legalized animal brothels. Okay, you have something called polyamory, which is basically a group of men and women getting together and having an open relationship with each other, and that's more than one husband and wife, like several husbands and several wives, or several boyfriends and several girlfriends together in an open sort of relationship, and that's totally fine. You have all this acceptance of so-called alternative lifestyles.
Consenting adults.
Yeah, exactly. As long as you're consenting adults, but for some reason, I guess because you put the word Muslim in front of it or Islam in front of it, and everybody loses their mind when we say that instead of having these relationships that have no basis in terms of objective morality, when you think about it, when we say that we want to have nikah with one man to up to 4 women, then people sort of, wait, this is wrong, this is not right, why, how can you do this is oppressive, this is backwards, you Islamic Muslim men are misogynists, but I mean the guy, this guy, non-Muslim man, who's got multiple girlfriends, or a married non-Muslim man who's got multiple mistresses, he's not a misogynist. He's doing, what's in his culture. Maybe they'd raise their eyebrows at it, but this is something that is known in their culture, and it happens, and it's quite common. That leads us to the next point: is that in most all European countries, I suppose, and all of the states in America, this is how we generally think of when we think of the West, that polygamy is illegal. It's not legal for you to have more than one marriage registered with the state. Whereas it's perfectly legal. In fact, it's not illegal at all in Europe, and not illegal in 29 out of 50 states in America for a married man, for adultery. Basically, adultery is not illegal in Europe or in over half of America. So an unmarried man can have any amount of girlfriends that he wants. Okay, even 100 girlfriends if he wants, if he can manage. Or a married man can have any amount of mistresses that he wants. It's not illegal, perfectly fine with it. Maybe it's something that it would be frowned upon in polite society or civil society, but I mean, it really depends on your preference. If that's something that that you're into and that you'd be willing to go for, then it's okay by them, because they live in a live and let live culture. There's no such thing as an objective morality to them. It's all relative. And that leads us to the next point, is that the nikah is not legally recognized as a marriage contract in these countries. So to them, it's as if this nikah between a man and a woman, where the person is the two of them are man and wife Islamically, it's as if they're boyfriend and girlfriend. Or if the man is married already, it's as if he has a wife and a mistress. Okay, so what's your problem again? You have no problem with adultery, with a married man having several mistresses, or an unmarried man having several girlfriends. So what's your problem with nikah? Yeah.
But that's literally it, though, isn't it? I mean, imagine the Muslim guy got stopped and asked, "Is this your wife?" And he says, "Yes." And then they say, and then he pulls out the Islamic certificate, which they don't recognize anyway. But then they will say, "Oh, we're prosecuting you." But if you turn around, same situation, and say, "She's my girlfriend," then they would just let him go.
Yeah. I mean, this thing, it's actually very, it's ludicrous, and at the same time hypocritical, isn't it? So, and this is something that's very common in these cultures. It's as if, in some European cultures, it's like the thing for, you have to have if you're a married man, you have to have a mistress. This is like known and accepted in the culture. I don't want to name any specific countries because that would be sort of rude and impolite. But this sort of thing goes on. And the next argument that they use is sort of these marriages, and the people involved in these marriages tend to try to abuse state financial aid or state financial assistance. I think in England you call them benefits. or in America they call it. I mean, there are different federal programs. One of them, it used to be called food stamps. It's called another name now. So basically, they say that these people, they go and they have all of these, they get these marriages and they have all of these children, and then since the marriages are not really recognized. The marriages are not recognized by the state except for his first marriage, then these women, these additional wives and children, they can claim benefits from the state for being sort of like single moms, and there is some sort of provision federally at a federal level or the state level to provide assistance to these families as sort of like families who need some sort of assistance. But that, I mean, if you look at it from another perspective, say you have a non-Muslim man and a non-Muslim woman who are, they're working there, I mean, but they need some assistance. They're on benefits, yeah? For example. Now, are you saying that this non-Muslim man and non-Muslim woman can't have any sort of relationship? Yeah? You mean they can't be boyfriend and girlfriend if they're on benefits? Just because they're on benefits, they can't have any relationship, they can't get married? So why is there a double standard here? I mean, if somebody needs to be on benefits, he needs to be on benefits. I mean, we're not saying that this is something that Muslims should do, yeah?
But there is a difference, because many people, unfortunately, from the Muslims, they do abuse this system. And the difference between what you might be saying about the boyfriend and girlfriend is, as soon as they move into the same address, they will be called what they call it like I forgot the terminology for it now.
Cohabiting.
They call it like they almost call it like a living-in wife, even though she's not the wife. They fall under the category. So as soon as that boyfriend and girlfriend are living in the same house, even if he's coming and going, but he's considered to be one of the residents of that house, one of them will lose the benefits, and one of them must no longer claim, etc. But so there are people in the West, and I know that personally, who purposely, they don't even work, the husband, and he's already on benefits with his first wife. He purposely goes and marries a second wife, which is not maybe a necessity for him, right? And he does so knowing that she will go and claim as a single mother. When they do that, they actually don't, they don't say, I have a boyfriend. They say that to claim as a single mother, they must say that the person who's the father of their kids is not, that he's no longer in the picture. So it's kind of it's entering the marriage in a completely wrong way, and then she has to go and write on a form that this man's left me, I don't even know where he is. He no longer comes to me. We're no kind of relationship whatsoever in the sense of a man and woman. So it's a bit.
So it's a different situation, you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, and I've seen that a lot. That's why because obviously you're just talking from a general perspective, but I've seen people doing that. People who actually, the husband with his first wife may be in a good. He may even have a good job and he may be able to provide for them, but it's just not enough to provide for a second or a third. But he'll purposely go and marry the second wife, saying she'll go and claim that she's a single mother and will get house and stuff like that. And he just goes there whenever he wants to and lives. He has basically, he doesn't even have to provide for her sometimes. Everything is completely free. That accommodation, the government pay the money.
Okay. So I mean, this you're saying basically that this sort of abuse does happen.
I mean, in certain communities, I could count probably more fingers I have on my hands of people that I knew doing that. In certain communities, unfortunately, which is it's also apart from being impermissible. It just when if they do get found out, it doesn't look too good either.
I mean, it's ruins the reputation of the Muslims. But I think it's right what you said. I mean, we can have another discussion, obviously, of whether it's obviously this sort of thing is frowned upon in general. I mean, you don't need a fatwa. You don't need a fatwa for this sort of behavior. It should come from your normal, ethics as a Muslim person. But sort of what I was trying to mention. And I think maybe we'll go to break after this, is that they sort of frame this argument in the way that it's not permissible for two people to have some sort of emotional or relationship in that they're a spouse or a boyfriend and girlfriend, just for the simple fact that they might be on benefits. And we can move on to the next point later, I suppose.
Inshallah. Well, we're going to go for a quick break now. So inshallah, join us after the break.
Time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says.
We can't just take knowledge and keep it as information. We have to transfer it into action. When he got up, he said one thing. Asalla nas? Did the people pray? In Hajj, for example, the primary example of how multiculturalism really looks like. All equal. I've got a dentist in Canada. Even though he's ripping holes in my teeth, he's got great akhlaq. I love visiting him. Identify the issue. Analyze it. Challenge it. And then try again. Because if you fail, big deal. Try again and keep trying.
If I think I lost my ablution, but I'm not sure, do I have to make wudu again? Is it allowed for Muslims to visit the graveyard, or is that shirk? Am I allowed to say Jummah Mubarak to someone? Can I get to know a sister before marriage? I have so many questions, and I feel that I've just reached a dead end. If only I could find someone trustworthy to answer my questions. Someone who speaks based on proof from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet.
Time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Welcome back to our viewers, to our episode, our weekly episode of A Time to Please Allah. This is me, Nabil Aziz, and I'm here with my brother Ismail Bullock. And today we're talking about polygyny as a continuation of what we spoke about last week. And I was mentioning these arguments that non-Muslims use against Muslims taking part in polygyny while they live in the Western lands. And there's just one more before we move on to the next topic. And this one is really a sort of a valid argument. It's a valid point, and this one is brought up by a lot of Muslims in general who care about protecting the rights of sisters in this situation, and that is the absence of legal recourse in the event of marital discord or in the event of divorce. Because let's take England for example. You do have Sharia. Is it like a court or a council?
We have Sharia councils, we have certain, the imams, they have those they take the role, you could say, that an Islamic judge would usually in marriages. So there is something like that.
Yeah. So in that situation, they do have some sort of people in authority they can go to, but those people don't have enforcement. Okay, so whatever ruling that they issue, they can't enforce. They can't. Sort of compel anybody to follow that ruling. Whereas in an Islamic country, when the judge issues an order in these personal affairs, then they have the power of enforcement behind that. The person could be taken to. Punitive measures can be taken against him if he defies the court's order. But it's a strong argument. It's a valid argument. Okay, but in response to that, we would say that even if you have a monogamous marriage and this ends up in divorce, if you go to the legal system of the non-Muslims, the only thing that you're entitled to as a Muslim, Islamically, are the rights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already given you as a husband and a wife. So, for example, in America, this is something very famous. It's become a huge joke, and it's not a joke. It's actually transgression against people. Where if the woman divorces the man, she gets half of everything. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not her property. She didn't earn the money. She didn't pay for the house, the car, but she gets half of absolutely everything. And then after that, she gets alimony payments and child support payments. Basically, it's just oppression against the man. Now, in that situation where you have a monogamous couple, one husband and one wife, and they end up in divorce and they end up in court in a non-Muslim country, for example, just going with an example of America, and she's only allowed to take the rights that the Sharia has given her. Okay, that's one of the stipulations of going to a non-Muslim legal system to get one's rights, and this is mentioned in the books of Aqidah. I don't know if you must have studied this, because as Muslims, we're not supposed to do what you call tahakum, seeking a judgment from a system that is other than the Islamic system. Now, the scholars have stipulated that in this situation where the Muslims are minorities living in a non-Muslim land, they have this sort of option where they can get their rights. There's some sort of dispute. Your rights have been violated. You can get your rights from this sort of system conditionally, with some conditions attached. Okay, so even in this situation, the only thing that the woman has the right to take from the man are the rights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given her. So even if you look at it from that perspective, polygyny has to polygyny. You don't have a problem that way as well, because first of all, this is a mutually agreed upon situation where the woman who's entering into a polygynous marriage, she has to agree. Nobody's forcing her to agree to this. The only problem is that if anything happens, she has no the state doesn't have any ability to enforce that she receive her rights. She's just basically depending on this man to do what's right Islamically, and that's definitely a problem, and that's one of the reasons why many scholars, especially in the West, they don't recommend that people take additional wives because of this situation, because of the danger it poses to the rights of Muslim women. Okay. And now basically we move on to the second topic is practically how would you go about doing getting into polygyny. That's probably more interesting. We've been talking about theory and logic and refutations and arguments and things like that. But now, for example, now you want to do polygyny, or as a woman you want to avoid polygyny. How would you go about doing that? Okay. It's interesting to me that a lot of the brothers, they don't think about if they're not married before and they're looking. At the moment they're looking to get married, and they're sort of speaking to potential candidates or what have you. It never crosses the mind of most Muslim men to speak about this issue of polygyny with the girl, because we have to remember that this is a mutually agreed upon choice. You can't force the sister to accept a polygynous marriage after the fact. The Sharia has stipulations in it that can that allow her to exercise the right to not be in this sort of arrangement. Either she could stipulate in the marital contract that if the husband takes another wife, she has the immediate right to get a divorce. Yeah. Or if I mean, this was an interesting fatwa I read, where basically the first wife can put a clause in the marriage contract that says that if he takes a second wife or a concubine, that whenever he does it, the second wife is immediately divorced, and that the concubine becomes free. And two of the madhabs have allowed it, and two of the madhabs have said this is not permissible. So the Sharia has stipulations and conditions in place that prevent the husband from forcing the first wife from entering into a polygynous marriage against her will.
I mean, I remember reading many years ago fatwa of Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, and he said the same thing, that the woman can stipulate in her marriage contract that he never gets a second wife.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's something that even from contemporary scholars that we, because a lot of people don't realize that, and if you say that, I mean, you sometimes see these things on the Facebook groups and stuff, and some brother will get up and say, "A'udhu billah, hey, how can anyone say that? This is kufr." You know, they literally say, "This is kufr, this is against Islam. How dare they? How can any woman stipulate in the marriage contract?" Then you come back, someone may come back and say, "Oh, okay." So it's something that a lot of people don't know. If you said that, they'll say, "No way, it's impossible. How can anything that's not haram and something that's they should accept, how can they then stipulate it in a marriage?" I mean, it all boils down to is it a necessity?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, the madhabs, if I remember correctly, I believe it was the Shafi and the Hanbali madhab, who their opinion was it was mustahab to only have one wife. It was preferred in their madhabs for a man to only have one wife.
Yeah, it's in all of the madhabs actually. Polygyny is just mubah. I mean, we mentioned it last
week. There's mubah,
but
I think it was the Shafi and Hanbali who actually said it's mustahab, recommended to only have one wife.
They do
so it's not as clear cut as many brothers like to necessarily think it is.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll get to the practical aspects of that, because that opinion, it seems first of all, as a man, and if you read the ayah in the Quran, it seems sort of counterintuitive. But if you think about it, I mean, this is probably the most practical ruling on the issue. But in any case, talking about polygyny with your potential spouse before you get married, this is important. You want to go into the marriage on the same page. I mean, this is something that don't ever assume that you can change a person after you get married. I mean, whenever you have this marriage discussion come up, this issue of changing the person after you get married is mentioned in the context of marrying a brother or a sister who's not so practicing, because they're sort of a nice guy or a nice girl, and I can change them, I'll give them da'wah and nasiha and they'll change. So, I mean, it can apply in this situation as well. Don't ever assume that you'll charm the pants off your wife after you get married, and she'll immediately start accepting that you take a second or a third or a fourth wife, and which leads us to our next sort of practical issue, is really for the men, the brothers, to actually be men. Okay, stop acting like children with regard to this issue. We have a number of situations. I mean, you and I, Ismail, we know personally of situations where brothers have gotten married to co-wives in secret. Okay, and maybe you can enlighten us. What is the sort of what do the scholars say about the condition of the marriage being announced after the nikah is done? Isn't that something that's important in our religion?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But then again, I mean,
nice one-word answer.
It's a very, it's also a very vast topic, and you have this whole concept of the, what they call the misyar marriage, and where it's not announced, and a woman may come and say, I I need a husband and I'm willing to give up some of my rights. Like, I have a place, I have money, I just need to have a husband, companionship, whatever, even if I only see him once or twice a week. So there is that opinion out there, and there are scholarly opinions some scholars who were completely against it, from what I can recall, like Sheikh Al-Albani, and you had some scholars like Sheikh bin Baz and Sheikh Al-Amin who allowed it, but then later on they said they noticed in their society that it was being very misused. So people were purposely doing these secret marriages with no intention of keeping them going. It was just for a bit of fun, and they were doing it with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 women, almost like the mut'a, Shiite version of marriage. So some of the scholars they said because of those people literally doing it again and again and again. So the same guy is marrying again and again and again different women under the pretext of you're my wife, but I have to keep it quiet. They changed their opinion later on. But I mean, to be quite honest, just like we know people who have done it, I also know people who have, done it and it's, maybe backfired on them, whether or not they got found out, whether they didn't get found out, but it ended up in divorce. So I think, and those same people said, at the end of the day, wasn't the right step to do, and I would never do it again, kind of thing, So that, I think a lot of people, they rush into it, It is kind of, you're saying, like being a man, not necessarily being a man just from the point of coming out in the beginning and saying to the first wife, I'm going to get married. Sometimes it can be being a man where the guy doesn't get overexcited and rush into something. So he may see a sister, bump into a sister, could be work, could be social network, it could be the Facebook, whatever it may be. It could be BlackBerry Messenger, who knows? And then something happens and the heart starts beating and, oh yes, I can get married. And they rush into it, maybe with pure intentions, right? We're not saying all the brothers out there are like scoundrels. Some obviously enter thinking, I can manage it. If anything goes wrong, whatever, everything will be fine. And then when it does go wrong, he's messed up a lot of his first, could have messed up a big issues with his first wife and first family, and then messed up this new wife, who probably end up won't even being his wife for very long after that, and then it's a big disaster. And that happens to so many people. I mean, we're not all, maybe brothers won't be watching this that's happened to them, so we're not judging them, but I think it needs to be very carefully planned, and wouldn't advise anybody to go through the secret. Not from I don't know anybody, and I can think of a few cases. I've never heard of any of these ones that have been done in secretly, apart from the general moral and common sense of that's not the real way you should go about it. But even the ones who have said, inshallah, I know, but might have good intentions, I don't think any of them have lasted. I don't know any, to be honest, that have actually lasted for whatever reason. Maybe not necessarily even they've been found out. For many of them have just ended up in disaster. So,
you said we're not judging them. I think we should judge them. I mean, nobody's going to give you a fatwa to be an ethical human being. I mean, Sheikh, I need your advice. Do I have to be an ethical human being? Do I have to be a nice person? I mean, this is expected of you as a human being, first of all, and as a Muslim, you should hold yourself to a higher standard. And I mean, the scholars are not going to go person by person, case by case, and weigh the mafasid and the masalih individually. I mean, you were expected as a Muslim man to do that yourself. I mean, this idea of having a marriage done secret, just because the nikah is sahih, or we have conditions in the Sharia. There's the ahkam taklifiyya, and there's the ahkam what's the word, wadiya or something. So either
situational.
So the sort of the act is batil or it's sahih. You know, so this contract might be sahih from a contractual perspective, but the ruling might not necessarily be that this thing is something good to do. And we know that in Islam, even if something is makruh, if something is disliked, we know that somebody who's persistent in these makruhat or insistent on them, we know that first of all he loses his adala. Yeah, he's no longer considered an upright, just person. So that means his witness is not accepted. Yeah, and if he's repetitive, or if he's insistent on it, he's branded a fasiq. Yeah, so it has consequences. People take these sort of things that are not haram and not wajib too lightly. Whereas the scholars were very serious, took them very seriously. And they say the mark of a righteous person is that he stops at the mustahabbat and he stops at the makruhat. So he treats the recommended matters as if they were obligatory, and he treats the makruh matters as if they were haram. And those are people, they call them people of wara', people of scruples, of inward piety. So, I mean, as a man, just basically summarize, be a man, Don't do things that are not befitting of a noble, chivalrous Muslim man. Because, I mean, just think about it. There's a lot that's expected of you as a Muslim man. You're supposed to have this sort of nobility and uprightness and trustworthiness and chivalry about you as a Muslim man. And that is the example upheld by the Prophet ﷺ and all of the Sahaba. And the next thing is that as a man, if you're interested in polygyny, I don't know about you, Ismail. You're a sort of student of knowledge, or you pretend to be one at least.
Okay.
But I mean, as a man, I mean, don't we have better things to do with our time rather than collect numerous wives? Personally, I only started sort of really seeking knowledge seriously when I was a full-grown adult, and I find it extremely difficult to balance giving my family their rights and sort of doing my studies, doing my revision, doing my memorization, and things like that. So, I mean, one of my teachers told me that he advised me, because his own teacher gave him the same advice, is that if you're interested in seeking knowledge, then just limit yourself to one wife.
I mean, I think apart from even the knowledge side of things, I think as a general topic, it needs to be whoever's gonna even think of going down that road, they need to really think about it, because even people who haven't done it in secret, they've come out to their wife and said, you know what, next week I'm getting married to a second wife. And they themselves don't even, they're just about providing for the first family, or they may have for many years not really been providing properly for the first family, and they've just maybe come to a new country and settled down and got a good job. So, the first wife, she's had patience over all these years, and the person has come to a different country, whatever, moved from country to country for many years. Could be anywhere, could be Morocco, Egypt, whatever. And now he's finally come, for example, just theoretically speaking, to the UAE or to Saudi, got himself a good job maybe, or whatever. And as soon as he gets the money coming in, number two comes along. And he knows very well that when he takes number two, that there's going to be big problems with number one. And this could almost be divorced, or the relationship will never, ever, ever be the same again. And it will destroy a big percentage of the marriage. If you go and ask any of the scholars, who will say it's the man's decision, he doesn't have to take permission, but they all always, most of them, Sheikh Uthaymeen, everybody, they add this clause. But if he knows, and they use the word tadmiyah, it will destroy his first marriage, then he shouldn't do it.
Absolutely, subhanAllah. This is why we mentioned the first point that.
But it's the other way around now. It's just the man's like, no, I don't care. It's my right, and anyone can, because just like we were talking earlier, the man can rush into some marriage because he's excited. It's another woman. There's a hype about it. The second wife, and he can rush into something without thinking, and then realize after, what the heck have I done? I've taken on something that I couldn't. I've taken more than I can handle, or I've bitten off more than I can chew, and then it falls apart. So likewise, even the people who aren't doing it secretly, they just come out and say, you know what, I'm getting married. But they know as soon as that happens, maybe in the end, okay, you're not going to get divorced, but that wife will be heartbroken the rest of her life, and you're never going to get that back. And she's always going to have this, resentment, and you're never going to
betrayal and
and. So that's also a big thing that many people, and even people who may be very practicing, maybe students of knowledge, may have done whatever or do, and they don't that's also something that someone should think about, because a lot of brothers, they don't read those fatwas, or they don't see those things, and or many of them find these things out when it's too late. Look, I've always read those fatwa. It's the man's right. It's the man's right. I just didn't realize at the end it says. That clause, the Sheikh says yes, but if it's going to do this, then don't do it,
Exactly.
So I think that's something very important that everyone should kind of ponder upon.
I mean, that's why it's so important to sort of discuss these things before you actually get married to the first wife, so you don't drop a bombshell on her 4 or 5 years and 2 or 3 kids into the marriage.
So we're just going to hold it there, because we've got to go for another break. So inshallah, join us for the final part of the show, inshallah, after the break.
Please Allah, a chance to gain reward I will spend on you, he says.
يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا حي يا قيوم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين اللهم أحسن عاقبتنا في الأمور كلها وأجرنا من خزي الدنيا وعذاب الآخرة برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم أصلح لنا ديننا الذي هو عصمة أمرنا وأصلح لنا دنيانا التي فيها معاشنا وأصلح لنا آخرتنا التي إليها معادنا واجعل الحياة زيادة لنا في كل خير واجعل الموت راحة لنا من كل شر.
We try to recap what we do here at Huda TV for the past week, and we try to share with you some of the latest news that is happening behind the scenes here at the station.
Living Islam would love a cooking show to be aired for Arabic dishes. Also more programs for children regarding manners.
We want to go ahead and take a look at our YouTube page right now and see how it looks as it stands. Well, I'm on the screen right now, but I'm not on TV. I'm actually through YouTube, as you can see right there. It's the same exact thing that you see on TV here live. It's exactly the same thing that is on our YouTube page through our live streaming. A great way to stay in touch with us.
It's my first time to call Huda TV, but I like it too much.
Because there is no program in Huda TV that it is not important for our Muslims, inshallah.
Time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back from the break. And we just obviously been discussing many points, but you're just about to go on to one of our final points you have on your list there.
Actually, we have a lot of points to get through. Maybe there needs to be a part 3, but I think we'll stop at two episodes. I mean, you mentioned something, and I thought it was really important. And it's interesting that you brought up the same point. Is that, I mean, do you really have enough money to take on?
Okay, one second. We have a phone call. Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Thank you very much for answering the phone call. Began my phone call. I'm not in the air, right?
So again?
I am not in the air, right?
You are on the air, yes.
Okay. It's just like I'm a little bit shy. But the thing is that I'm 11 years Muslim, alhamdulillah. And whenever I go visit my family or people, in summer times, they keep asking me, just bugging with the same question about polygamy. And the third question is, what is the difference between a second wife and an affair? When does it turn an affair into a second wife?
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard to explain, but alhamdulillah, I'm just first wife, and I represent the second, the third, and the fourth to my husband, inshallah, bismillah. But to respond to the non-Muslims, I know it's a very touchy subject, but when does an affair becomes like a second wife or something halal, or how does it happen, or how to explain to them?
Mm-hmm. Okay, inshallah. Well, obviously, it's a very long discussion, but I mean, and maybe Brother Nabil can add something after. In a nutshell, there's a big difference, because we know in the West that when the person is having an affair, we know it from real life situations. We know it from the TV and the movies. It's always something which is very dirty, very shady, very hidden. So he'll go to her once a week. He'll meet her secretly. He'll call his wife, I'm stuck in the office for a business meeting, and it'll be all very. And he keeps going to the woman he's having an affair with and saying to her, I'm going to leave my wife. I don't love her. It's a very bad marriage, just to keep her interested in him. And it goes on like this for a very long time. Whereas in Islam, from the very beginning, he says, I'm going to marry you. You're going to be my wife. I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to, you'll be my wife. And he. Ideally, he announces it to the people. So there's a very big difference between the two. And that's why we were mentioning the concept of having the secret second marriage. Even though it fulfills conditions of a marriage contract, it's still really not the right way to do it, which many people have found out. It's just like someone who prays with a t-shirt with an image on it. He's fulfilled the conditions of the prayer, and his prayer, inshallah, is accepted, but he is, sinful for wearing this image on his while he's praying on his shirt, and it reduces the validity of the prayer. However, it is still a valid prayer in the sense of he fulfilled the conditions like the ruku' and the sujood and the takbir. So that's why we're saying that the proper Islamic marriage, when someone gets a second wife, is that she's the same as the first wife. Ideally, there should be no difference between the two in the sense of how he provides for her, how he treats her. So there's a big difference between having the affair where he, as we mentioned, and being the second wife. And I think there's some, to go into a lot of detail about it, I think there was a book written by Dr. Bilal Phillips called Polygamy in Islam, where he goes into many aspects of how polygamy, in many senses, sometimes for the man is something natural. And he goes into various, even non-Muslim arguments that are positive towards polygamy, and he goes into the history of how men in general were always polygamous, and it goes into a lot more detail, which I think, I've had discussions with non-Muslims before who sat down with me and said to me, this is disgusting, this is disgraceful, and after maybe 20 minutes of discussing the pros and cons and the nature of the man, and in the end the woman actually said to me, you know what, I could never agree for my husband to do such a thing, but I can understand the perspective now of why Islam allows it, just from having this kind of discussion on for about 15, 20 minutes. So that's in a nutshell. I don't know if Brother Nabil has anything he wants to add.
Yes.
The difference between an affair and a second wife is the nikah. A valid marriage in Islam requires the consent of the woman's male guardian and 2 upright male witnesses. So an affair is just something secret between the man and the woman, and nobody knows about it. So the difference between the affair and the second wife is the marriage contract, which ultimately one of the conditions is that the marriage is announced as I don't know if it's obligatory, if it's or if it's sunnah, but this is something that is known. The marriage has to be announced, and it's completely different from an affair. The woman has to be, they have to have a valid marriage contract. The husband has to pay for the wife's maintenance. It's obligatory on him. If he doesn't, the wife has a right to a divorce, or the court can order him to can sort of take his money so that he can maintain his wife. It's completely different to an affair, whereas an affair is just some sort of secret fling between the man and the woman.
I think you had another question, sister. Okay, so yeah, if we go back now, to we got a few minutes left, I believe. So
I mean, you mentioned. This is something for the brothers to think about. Do you really have, or do you really make enough money to take on a second wife? Just think about it honestly. I mean, we know, okay, this is something that we have iman in, that when you get married, the woman, she comes with a rizq, yeah? And this is true.
I think the sister called back again. Assalamu alaikum.
Yes, hello?
Yes, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, brother. It's me, Iman, again. It's just,
yes.
I understand the whole explanation, and it's in a whole nutshell, as you mentioned. But, there has to be a beginning of a relationship, so for it in order to become a nikah and so, and to become a wife, I mean, for the second woman. But when does it start being not an affair? Because they have to meet somehow.
I see what you mean. I mean, obviously, Islamically, ideally, of course, is that whether it's a first, second, third, or fourth, that it would be an Islamic marriage, which really, I mean, many people, get married in other ways, and but the proper Islamic marriage is whereby, there's many different ways of doing it, but it's not like getting, bumping into them in the shopping mall and say, "Oh, hi, how are you? Can I have your number?"
That's what we know,
I mean,
the way to meet.
Of course, but I mean, the other way, would be. It depends on what country. It could be even here in the UAE or in the West. Like-minded Muslim men and women. They're going to a particular mosque to learn. The brother, sister, that I'm looking to get married. I prefer a sister from this kind of age group, this kind of education, and they say, well, there's a particular sister who's interested, and they're making a meeting, and either they agree or they don't agree. I mean, that's how it works. Usually Islamically, and it's usually very. On a general speaking, even in the West, where there's some people will say, yes, because Muslim women, if they get divorced, there's a big stigma. Maybe in certain countries, but in the West, like America and Europe, and I'm sure I imagine you're from Europe, there's no big stigma really about divorce. Like, it's not like a shameful thing. So many of the people I know maybe 50, 60, 70 new Muslims I know in the UK, they all got married like this. The man's a new Muslim, and they all got married through introduction through the mosque, without dating, without getting, going out to the movies or for a meal, and they still happily married after all these years and have many children. So this is how it would work, whether it's a first, second, third, or fourth. There's no real difference when it comes to how they should get married in the beginning. It should never become. A guy's got a first wife, then he sees a girl and he has a bit of an affair, and then she becomes his second wife. No, if that's how it started, it's just as haram as starting his first wife like that. No marriage should start with from a haram situation. Ideally, of course, if some people make a mistake and fall into that and they make tawbah, then this is forgiven. Many people, they didn't realize and they did it, and then they realized afterwards and they made tawbah. So that, that's a different, obviously a different scenario.
Yes, definitely. It's as you mentioned, it's in the ideal situation of Islam, but it doesn't happen like that in reality. I mean, nowadays,
if somebody did make the mistake and he got to know somebody, whether it's a first or second wife, and then he realized, I should marry her. Let's get married, and they went and got married. Then they've done something permissible. They've done something which is good. They've stopped doing a haram. But of course, it should never start like that. So if a guy happened to do that with a second he met a woman when he was married and they had some kind of dating relationship, and then he decided to marry her. Of course, once he actually married her, it's a valid marriage. But of course, this is not the way whatsoever. He should find his first or second or whatever wife it may be. It should always be from the proper Islamic way. It should never be cheating on his first wife and then marrying her as a second. That shouldn't be the way.
Very tough. I just want to add, I am from Mexico.
Okay.
And to be a Muslim, the way should be the ideal way. It's very challenging. It's very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And to be ready, having lots of knowledge and the hikmah, how to apply that, what to respond, what not to say, and it's a big responsibility. So, brother, thank you very much. I let you go.
Inshallah.
Have a good night. Good night. Bye.
So, mashallah, that was a nice input from the sister, and we've actually come to the end of the show, subhanAllah. As they say, time flies when you're having fun. So, Jazakallah khair for coming on again, discussing it with us on the show.
Well, Yaakov, we have so much left that we couldn't get through. What can you do?
We'll see. Who knows? Maybe it could be a part 3 if you have that much material. We'll see.
I mean, you can have another show on, I suppose, marriage in general, which would be a good show.
That's true. I don't think we've touched upon that. So maybe with Brother Gabriel next week, you can continue on that and then marriage in general. And inshallah, Jazakumullahu khairan for tuning in. Again, time to please Allah. And please join us, inshallah, same time, same place next week, here on Huda TV, live from Dubai. And I leave you as usual. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says, all who spend in good cause. Good deeds are opportunities, sparkling bright and true, raising you in the sight of Allah and adorning Al-Jannah for you. So rush to earn His reward. Don't forget the